Join in. And we can say hi to Mark. Okay.
All right.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good morning, Elizabeth. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
This is great. So, just for everyone tuning in, my name is Elizabeth Keating. I'm an ILC Advisory Board member. We're joined today by my friend and co-founder and co-managing partner of Enlightened Hospitality Investments, which is doing some incredible things. And we get to hear all about that today from Mark. So thank you, Mark.
Our pleasure.
So before we get started, I have a few admin things, so just bear with me for 1 minute. So on Friday, I hope everyone will join us. ILC Advisory Board member Bashar Wali will be interviewing Craig Greenberg. He's the former CEO of 21C Museum Hotels, so that should be awesome. And then check out Instagram and LinkedIn for giveaways. We have some great giveaways, ILC keychains, t-shirts. If you tag your friends in your posts, then tell them to follow us. So check that out. And then the last piece is ILC relies heavily on these live events as our main source of revenue. So if you care to donate, please do so at ilcongress.com. Okay, so now to the really fun stuff. So Mark, we met a few years ago and I had an opportunity to learn about what you and your team do. It was something that it sounds like, or maybe you can tell us the impetus for beginning EHI.
Sure. So we formed the fund. EHI stands for Enlightened Hospitality Investments. Enlightened Hospitality is my partner Danny Meyer's theory, which he talks about in Setting the Table, which says you maximize returns by prioritizing your employees first amongst your various stakeholders, and you prioritize your investors last. And it's a virtuous cycle. And if anything breaks along the way, it all falls apart. But it prioritizes employees, then customers, then suppliers, then community, and then shareholders. And
Okay.
for that to work, it's a virtuous cycle. And we thought that by finding companies that practice enlightened hospitality and backing them, we could achieve outsized returns.
So what type of companies are those? I know some of them and I'm a big fan of some of them, but maybe you can tell us what type of companies and then maybe name a few just so we're familiar with what brands you're talking about.
Sure. So we broadly invest in hospitality and hospitality technology. And
Okay.
we were an early investor in Resi, which was sold to American Express. And we're investors in some fast casual brands like Salt and Straw Ice Cream, Joe Coffee, Dig, which used to be Dig In. We've got some technology investments, companies like Bento Box, Triple Seat, which books reservations in private dining room areas. And then we've got some companies like Goldbelly, which is a food marketplace that has done really well during the pandemic. We've got a company called Madison Reed, which is in the hair coloring space, has also done very well during the pandemic. So those are
Great.
some examples.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And so maybe talk to us about what catches your eye as it relates to brand investment. I know the subject for our discussion today was what is EHI betting on? Diversity, delivery, and dedication. So when you look at what you're investing in, how do those three maybe disciplines come into play?
So it was good alliteration using those three,
Yeah.
but we're really looking for a couple things. We're looking in the food space for food that's craveable and brands that have a tribe. We're looking for people that have a following. We're looking for people that are passionate about what they're doing, and in the technology side, we're looking for disruptive technology. And there's certainly lots of innovative things going on around hospitality tech right now, and we're trying to back some of the winners in that space.
So as it relates to diversity, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago, but what do you look for? I think, as we look to do better in the world of diversity and inclusion, you and I talked about some ways in which, we look inwards at kind of staff and how do we represent staff. We look outwards in terms of the investments that we're making and who runs and owns those companies, and also at the board. So what are some just sort of broad strokes? What are some of the things that you've looked at to in this progression of change as it relates to.
Sure. So from my days in investment banking, I've always been a believer that diverse teams win. And I always say it's not just the right thing to do, but it's a smart thing to do. Because why would you want perspectives from one narrow group of people? And in the investment banking world, having started in that 40 years ago, it was very much a white male game, and the better performing teams are the teams that have adapted and have really broadened what they're doing in terms of their hiring and the customer base they're working with. So that was the backdrop I took into Enlightened Hospitality. Of the 9 companies we have right now, 6 of them have female either CEOs or founders. So that was not a deliberate approach, but it was a way of saying that a more diverse workforce does better. I think the other thing that we've done as we've looked at our portfolio is we've done a really good job on gender diversity. We've not done as good a job on ethnic racial diversity. And we spent over the summer, we had an intern help us look at various Black-owned businesses because I think there's going to be a big tailwind for
Right.
Black-owned businesses given what's going on in the world. And we've looked at 5 or 6 really interesting opportunities in that sector as well.
And that's so amazing to hear. And I hope you guys keep pushing on that because it's something that I believe, if we all work together, I think we can get to new places. And I think you're right. It's about the internal team reflecting and representing diversity equally as the investments are making, equally as what is the board made up of, right? Because then you're all coming from different places in life and career opportunities. So I love to hear that. And I hope we can continue to push in that direction. When you went back to your co-founder, Danny Meyer, and yourself, that philosophy of enlightened hospitality, how does that drive the decisions you make as it relates to investing? You touched on this a little bit, but maybe can we explore it a little more?
Sure. So Danny has said that he can walk into a location, he can walk into someone's fast casual restaurant location and watch the way the team interacts with each other and have a pretty good read as to whether they practice enlightened hospitality or not by the way they deal with each other. And if you look and you go into a place, there was a business we were looking at, and the numbers were all attractive and sort of met past our test. We're generally making $10 to $20 million investments for minority stakes in businesses, and we're investing out of a $220 million fund that's almost fully invested right now. But
Awesome.
but Danny's belief is you can walk in and make a decision as to whether they're practicing it. So we looked at it. We looked at a company, and every time we'd go into their location, you'd find 1 or 2 disinterested people standing in the front, not a warm hello, welcome, can I help you? And you could tell there was something about the way they were hiring, they were recruiting, they were training that
Right.
wasn't working, and you had a really disaffected workforce. And we said ultimately that's not going to be a winning strategy. So that's some of the ways we try to do it, but it's really an intuitive feel, and people call enlightened hospitality different things. It can be conscious capitalism, it can be a bunch of different things, but it's really the belief that nice people can win, and that's our strategy in how we're investing.
I love that. I love that. And do you think that is there an opportunity for those where you walk in and see a problem because you can create this incredible culture that's enlightened? Do you also look at that as an opportunity whereby you say, okay, I can pinpoint the pressure point and I can fix that if we invest in them and we put the right resources and tools, or is that's a deal breaker?
It's a great question, and it's kind of a fine line. We say that we really don't want to invest in turnarounds, and those can be both
Okay.
operational and cultural turnarounds. We just think we're looking at about 100 deals for every one we're doing. So with that kind of percentage that we're investing to start with, to take on the challenge of a cultural turnaround is not something we probably do.
Understood. And when you say people first, when you invest, what does that mean? Like if I have a company, what am I going to get from you as an investor? What does people first actually mean?
So people first is what we're hoping we're backing in companies we're picking to invest in. So we're hoping they're prioritizing their employees first, and
Okay.
you can generally get that watching the way when we're trying to get introduced and learn more about a company by the way the leader of that company involves other people and treats them.
Right. So I think you're saying that, you're meeting the owners of the company, but equally you're maybe spying on. I don't think if you two walked in there, if both you and I are walking there, it might be intimidating, but you're looking at what that looks like from a tribe perspective, which I think we can all relate to, whether it's, hospitality experience or otherwise. You can tell when someone at the top is not treating them well, or they feel like they're being taken advantage of in some capacity. And that's a feeling as a customer that you don't want to have, and makes you want to walk away from something, even if it has the most incredible ice cream or delivery or whatever it might be. So that makes complete sense. How do you turn a good company into a great one? Is there anything you can share with us that's kind of your secret?
We say our role is we want to be like the supportive aunt or uncle
Okay.
that's there to offer encouragement when asked, but we're not there to be the parent telling people what to do.
Okay.
And we're trying to pick companies and management teams that we think have the skill set to bring the company to the next level. And we're there to offer advice and help on a whole variety of things when asked.
That's great. Can you describe the range of brands you invest in? I think you talked about this, but is there, I think in particular, delivery? It sounds like your fund's doing really well. I know we talked about that. Does delivery in particular, is that kind of a home run? Because it seems like pre and post COVID, I would imagine that there is a desire to have greater delivery service. I feel like it's not so great right now in terms of some of the service that's offered out there, or maybe how they treat their employees. So I think how important is delivery to any of the businesses you invest in right now? Or they
It's critical for anyone in the food space, or actually, in the hair coloring space, to find ways to drive revenues outside of the four walls of a location. So delivery becomes increasingly important. Some have done it really well. I mentioned Goldbelly as a company that's thrived during the pandemic, in part because there's this emotional attachment to food. And one of the broad themes we talk about is that the desire for hospitality hasn't gone away, but it gets consumed in different ways. So Goldbelly has tapped into the feeling of food and nostalgia from various trips and places around the country, that taps into that memory. And we think that's really one of the things that made that delivery work. I think if you think about delivery as a traditional, Postmates, DoorDash, Uber Eats, those are rough businesses. They charge the restaurants a lot. I think there's a lot of overcapacity in that space. We have not looked to invest there. One of the things we found is they've clustered around the bigger markets, and kind of a broad theme of ours is that the places where you have the highest growth of millennials tend to not be New York, San Francisco, LA. And a lot of the brands we look at work on the coasts, and we look and say, we're trying to find things to invest in that can work in other parts of the country. So if you look at where the biggest millennial growth is right now, it's places like Detroit, Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh. So we try to find things that work in markets like that. So long way of saying, we're seeing some innovation around the delivery space in some of the smaller markets, and we're looking to see, are there some things that are economically viable to get a better delivery model in some of the smaller markets, and if it works, maybe you get taken out by one of the bigger players.
Right. Well, it's also interesting, just sort of what I'm seeing in hospitality, this push, and also in real estate is just this push, maybe outside of urban markets. I don't know if it'll stick, but to your point, I think they're so expensive, and the cost is so high that people are moving to those other markets. And then also you find, I think, interesting people doing interesting things outside of major markets, because creative people can succeed without this huge overhead, and they can pursue their passions. So maybe you're finding things like Salt and Straw, or I'm not sure of the where Dig In went from, but outside of big markets potentially is a better way to incubate ideas too.
Well, Salt and Straw is a good example of that. We invested when they had just opened up their first location in Los Angeles. Their hometown is Portland, Oregon, and they had
Right,
three locations in Portland,
yeah.
and had just opened one. They were opening their second in LA, and they have 22 locations up and down the West Coast, and are getting ready to expand on the East Coast sometime soon. So we're pretty excited about what's gone on with them.
No,
And there's actually an example of delivery. So without that business model was, people would stand in long lines to come taste what we think is the best artisanal ice cream in the country. And Now they've had a resort to pick up and delivery and have done it very effectively to the degree that they're back almost to kind of pre-pandemic levels in terms of business without people standing in line tasting ice cream.
Right. Well, and I think there's also, I would imagine, a stamp of validation, give it, whether people know it or not, when it shows up in those type of markets, and then shows up on Goldbelly, for instance, where you know that it's coming to you from someone who's already kind of filtered the best of the best, and so that you're only getting
Right.
those, which I think is great. You mentioned technology and playing a big part. So is this something that when you invest, they need to have a really solid tech forward piece, or is that something that if you can see it, you know it, and you guys can help them get to that point?
Generally, they need to have it in place because that will have driven better results, which will make it more attractive. But there are things like Triple Seat, which is a business we're really excited about. And Triple Seat controls the private dining room space. And we think on the other side of the pandemic, well, their experience has been in countries in Asia in particular, private events were the first thing that got canceled, but we also think they're going to be some of the first things that come back. And we think when people want to come back and entertain, they're more likely to want to do it in private rooms than sitting in the middle of a crowded restaurant. So we think it's going to be a good leading indicator on the way out. They've also been able to pick up customers who have spaces like sports teams and sports venues and some of the big hotel companies in Las Vegas in particular that used to have tons of events, don't now, and need a service like this that can help book and manage their private event spaces.
So that's, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the product. So Triple Seat, you said?
It's called Triple Seat, and what it is it books private dining rooms and event
Oh,
spaces.
all right.
It's generally been a business-to-business model. One of the things they're working on is a business-to-consumer model because anyone as a consumer who's tried to book private event spaces knows the experience where you serially call 5 or 6 places and hope they call you back. And
Yeah.
from the restaurant owner, the hotel owner's space, it's not efficient either because you can't adjust pricing based on demand. It's not. It should be like an airline seat. Once you've lost it, it's gone. But there's an inability to do that without a more interactive model, and that's one of the things that Triple Seat brings.
So interesting. And I think for a lot of people tuning in as hospitality, either owners, investors, management companies, it's a great thing for them to hear. If they wanted to sort of look into it, I think it's like, especially everything we're trying to do during COVID and post-COVID, is trying to leverage different resources, technology. So that sounds like a great one for people. Question going back to your investment, at what stage do you invest in companies?
We're typically kind of a rounds B through E. It gets harder to define those because you have people doing, a couple $100 million seed rounds. So the labels have gotten skewed a bit, but we're generally, as I said, investing $10 to $20 for a minority stake in a company. So
And
it's got to be a company that's worth kind of $30 to $100 million before we invest.
okay. And then what is the minimum or maximum investment? What's the kind of range that you would invest?
That's pretty much our range. Once in a while, we'll make something that's slightly smaller if
Okay.
we see the ability to put in more money later. But
Okay.
when we raised the first fund, our goal was to have 10 to 12 portfolio companies, and we're at 10 now. We probably have room to make one more investment in this fund, and that'll be it.
Okay.
There's a couple companies that are doing interesting things that I didn't mention. One is Bento Box, which does, they're well known in the restaurant space. They do website and design for started as menus, and it was a business that pivoted during the pandemic to really build businesses, transaction processing businesses that have built a really attractive business around scheduling pickup and delivery for restaurants. So they've shifted and have continued to do well. And another company that's done really well during the pandemic is a company called Bonzo, which is chickpea pasta. So
Oh, yeah.
we were in an investment committee meeting one day, and Danny, much like if you've ever watched the movie The Graduate, where the future is plastics, Danny said, "I think the future is chickpeas." And we looked and found this great chickpea pasta company that we're investors in. They've got the fastest selling brands in Whole Foods, and
Yeah.
it's a great brother management team, and they've done very well.
So
And
interesting. That. I love that, and I know that brand well. So it's cool to see how, like, I clearly see them in in Whole Foods. I think we've had a few of their items, and so it's interesting to see that you're part of that and scaling that brand, which is great. Um, you touched on this, but what value do you bring to companies, and how hands-on are you in everything that you do in that investment?
You know, when someone asks for help, we're all in. But as I said, we're not busy trying to push ourselves into the process. You know, we're there when needed, and that's there's kind of a life cycle of investments that I find where early on there may be a bunch of things companies want help with, and then it sort of settles in for a while. Then there's a new set of challenges, and you know, we like to think we've seen a lot of these things over the course of our careers. So we're around to help when asked.
Well, and I think it goes back to the point of dedication, and you know what to look for, and then you dedicate yourselves to seeing that through. And I think, part of it is, and I think, anyone in any skill set, sometimes if it's just innate, like, what to look for. And I think find it based on your career and Danny's career. And it's an interesting too, if you maybe kind of take us back a little bit, how did you get into the world of hospitality? That previously what you were doing?
No, I was an investment banker running tech media telecom groups,
Okay.
but but Danny and I had been college roommates, so I sort of have vicariously lived the hospitality business for the last 40 years, and
Nice. Okay.
and in a lot of ways tried to run my investment banking groups the same way Danny ran his restaurants by trying to put our employees first and trying to build a diverse workforce and realizing that a more diverse team and building talent is the best way to build winning teams.
I love that. I love that. Pause. Sorry.
You froze, so go ahead.
Yes. How did you guys decide you wanted to come together to do this, and what year was that?
It was about, well, I just had my fifth work anniversary yesterday, my my fifth
Okay.
anniversary. I did, and Pete Mavrovidis, who came over with me, and it's our third partner. So
Okay.
yesterday was our 5-year work anniversary. In an investment bank, on your 5-year anniversary, you often get a coffee mug with the name of the investment bank. We didn't get that, but we got a nice note from Chip Wade, who's the president of Union Square Hospitality.
Okay.
So
Great.
how do we come
Great. Great.
together
Great.
to
And how
decide
did?
to do this? So I was having dinner with Danny, over the summertime. We would typically get together every couple of weeks because our families were often out of town, and we would get together and have dinner. And at one of these dinners, I said, I'm actually getting ready to leave investment banking to go join a private equity firm. And Danny said, really? I'm thinking about starting a private equity firm. So I looked at him cross-eyed and said, how does that work exactly? And the reality was, over the years, he had made a whole bunch of investments in the hospitality space. Um, and they had done really well for the most part. He was one of three seed investors in Open Table, and that came about not because he needed people to fill. He didn't need Open Table to put people in his restaurants, because he had Union Square and Gramercy Tavern, and they were sold out anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
what he really wanted was to learn more about his customers so he could provide a better customer experience. So that was his original interest in Open Table, and that was, God, that was probably 20 years ago. So that was really cutting edge at that point, to say that you can use data to drive a better customer experience.
Right.
So he looked and said, I've made a bunch of these investments, and it has been more accidental than intentional, and it would be great to intentionally build a private equity business to invest in hospitality and hospitality tech. And we also thought it was a way to take some of the best practices that other people were doing and bring them into Union Square Hospitality Group. The way we describe it is, we want to back businesses with people that have ideas we wish we thought of ourselves, with management teams we wish we'd hired to do that. And that was really the premise behind setting the fund up.
I love that. And how many people are you now at EHI?
EHI is a 6-person investment team. We are
Hmm.
actually in the market to add a couple people. We're getting ready to raise our next fund, and we'll need to add to the team. So we're just
Great.
starting that process right now.
We'll have people email you.
Perfect.
We won't inundate. But no, I think it goes back to your point. just to touch on this before we kind of close is, about greater change and greater opportunity. I think part of it is probably through the hiring process, which sounds like you guys are really open-minded. Also encourage people who have friends or family members who are creating companies to not be shy. I mean, I think the more people kind of pitch great ideas and are eager to kind of do that. Is there also, when you talk about change and support, do you guys do anything in the way of whether it's an internship model or workshops or anything to give people a chance? I mean, I think part of the problem is that people don't think that their idea maybe can grow into something bigger, or maybe don't have the proper tools or resources. Do you guys offer any workshops, or is it internships? Like, how do you kind of get people familiar with what it takes to build
So,
a company?
so we really do a lot of work with the high schools. We sponsor a high school every year and try to talk about what the opportunities are in the hospitality space. 2 years ago, we sponsored Food and Finance High School, which is a wonderful organization. They 70% of the kids there are first generation high school students. And I think a lot of the kids go there having watched Top Chef and thinking those are the only jobs in hospitality. So the school's done a really good job saying it's this vast field and there's lots of interesting career opportunities. And last year we sponsored a high
Right.
school in Long Island City, and unfortunately with the pandemic, we got to do less, but we did have the students come in a couple times to hear seminars and curriculums, really different things that let them know there's careers in hospitality. Because we think unless you get kids when they're young, it's by the time they're out of college, it's too late. You've missed the opportunity to really build a pipeline of talent.
Right. I
So to your
agree. And
question
I
about
think
to your
that the
question to
more,
your question about sorry, as I said, your question about what can companies do, we have not done kind of kind of Shark Tank kinds of things before. Um,
okay.
Danny never wanted to go on that because he never really wanted to be a Top Chef judge. He did it finally because he didn't want to criticize what people were doing and be, it's demoralizing to people. So we try to avoid that. But with the companies we've backed and some of our sister companies like a Shake Shack, we do have annual symposiums of the community of companies we work with for them to share ideas and once the pandemic started, we've done a couple calls with our community of companies just to share ideas and really share thoughts on what we've been seeing out there.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I would be eager to help or support you, because I think it'd be incredible to really kind of get down to your point. Like, people think hospitality, they think, oh, chef or front of house or, a service position, but don't think about, oh, I can build a company that's in the hospitality space and have somebody help me get there through tools, through money. And don't think about it that way, and don't think that they can actually do it. And they may have an incredible idea or an incredible recipe, that they're doing things differently because of an allergy or something that they've seen, and they're creating a baby food business or so. I'm just trying to think of things that, like,
So we're doing to my point earlier that hospitality gets consumed in different ways. Danny's been saying that safety is the new hospitality, and we've just partnered with our
oh,
restaurants with Clear, who's got a really exciting business called Health Pass that is a way to monitor the safety of your employees coming in, if they had temperature checks, ultimately if they've been vaccinated, do they have antibodies, and we think it's something that may pass on the guest side as well. So that's
wow.
that's a partnership we're really excited about right now.
This is Clear as in the what we see in the airports, the same.
Exactly, exactly. And we think there's applications in the lodging space where you can go in and they can scan your retina and they have all your payment information and your likes and dislikes. So we think they're doing a lot of really cutting edge stuff right now.
And you're invested in that, or not yet? Maybe.
Maybe,
No.
maybe.
A good friend of mine and someone who's also an ILC board member started Blue Canary, just as a shameless plug. But they do something for in the hospitality space that's very similar in so much as looking at safety and borrowing from where they pivoted was hospitals. So I just think it's interesting. You're right, that safety, and there's different forms of it. I mean, I can only imagine even just kind of the regular checks that restaurants receive, and even the coding that if you get an A rating or a B rating, right, to prepare you for that and ensure that you don't have to fall in that category that gives you kind of that big letter out in front.
Right.
But disaster, right? If one small thing goes wrong and an employee didn't know. So I think, that's interesting to hear about safety as something you invest in too. We didn't have that as a topic, but I like it.
No.
Great. That's, so that's time flew. And I really appreciate everything that you've shared. Certainly if people want to reach out, they can visit your website, which I don't know off the top of my head. Is it ehi.com?
EHI.fund.
Fund. Okay, so that's where people
Yep.
can go for more information.
They can.
But thank you
Yep.
for your time. It was great to
My
have you
pleasure.
on, and we certainly learned a lot.
Always good to see you, Elizabeth. Thank you.